Hello, good afternoon. Okay, so I know you have a whole course on ethics. I'm sure you do. So I'll try not to do all, to overkill this, but let me go over some basics about ethics. You may not have heard about this, but and this isn't going to be on the licensure. This is just because I think it's something useful to know about. There's a thing called the Universal Declaration of Ethical Principles for psychologists. I'm just really interested in international ideas and international collaborations. Check it out. It's based on the belief that psychologists or mental health workers are citizens of the world. Um, it was presented at the United Nations in Paris. Uh, it's kind of a highlight the interactions between human rights and ethical principles, peace, freedom, responsibility, justice, humanity, and morality. It's based on a wide range of historical, ethical constructs and sources. And what I really like about it is it's not nationalistic. It's multiple nations were involved. So I'll connect you with this on the main page. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about just how to avoid having ethical problems come up. And this, I think, will also, these concepts, these ideas will help you on the exam. Thinking about things in terms of standard of care and vigilant watchfulness. Those are two terms that will come up a lot when ethics for therapists. So standard of care. You want to really never practice in isolation. That's when people get into problems ethically. It's because they don't have a community. They don't have either a supervisor. They don't have other colleagues that they talk to. So even if you're in a private practice, you need to have some other way to talk about cases, some sort of group of colleagues that you can discuss things with. That's really important. When people fall into ethical problems, it's usually because they don't have that. Be really aware of your scope of competence, your scope of professional responsibilities, what you are trained to do, and what you're not. Make sure that the clients are informed, and that's informed of about how you go about your practice, the ways that you normally work with people, confidentiality, the limits of confidentiality, and so forth. I'm really fascinated. It's not a thing here in Mexico to have an informed consent. And although I like how in different contexts people do things, therapists do things in different ways, I'm really grateful to have learned about informed consents because it really helps out in lots of different ways. Make sure you discuss all cases and document all directives, either when you're in supervision or also in your notes. Sorry, I just decided to do construction behind me, I guess. Attempt to utilize best practice and evidence-based approaches. I mean, I know we all have our own theories, and some have more research support than others. But if you are ever in any legal or ethical difficulties, if you can show that you were utilizing intervention strategies that have research evidence to support their use, or best practice, you'll be in a much more defensible place. Don't practice above your level of competency. Yeah. I mean, it's different if you're a supervisee working under supervision, then you're going to, of course, be trying things that you haven't tried before. And then it's sort of on the responsibility of your supervisor to make sure that you're not practicing outside of competence. But when you're a practicing therapist out there in the world, if you don't be doing work that you have never received any training for, and always be seeking to continuing education and to improve your skills. Document any exceptions or provide any rationale if you're ever doing anything that's sort of outside the normal scope of practice. Address any legal or any ethical issues. Like sometimes things will come up. There'll be, I mean, maybe you didn't know that the person coming into session was someone that is related to your family. I don't know what it is. Something you didn't see happen, but address it promptly. You know, sometimes people are sort of stunned when an ethical challenge comes along, and then they don't act, and that ends up causing them more problems than the initial issue. Address them promptly. Vigilant watchfulness. Basically, you need to be doing self-monitoring so that mistakes don't lead to any client harm. Be aware of billing and reimbursement issues, and have a reasonable knowledge of law and ethics. Okay, I'm gonna post the code of ethics for you, but I won't go over each and every single one of them. But you really should know them all. For the test, you definitely need to know and be familiar with all of the codes of ethics. Here's some of the umbrella principle, though: responsibility to clients. Um, understand all the different ones that fall under that. The rights of the people that are coming to see you, and you doing everything you can to make sure that the services you provide are appropriate. Confidentiality. This is one of the big ones. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but this is where people get into problems. And there's, you know, with evolving technologies, it's even some new challenges. Marriage and family therapists have unique confidentiality concerns because the client's in a therapeutic relationship, maybe more than one person. Therapists respect and guard the competence of each individual. Principle 3, professional competence and integrity. You're going to maintain the highest levels of professional competence and integrity. Look at the concepts underneath those. Principle 4, responsibility to students and supervisees. I'll briefly mention that in a minute. Responsibility to research participants. The Code of Ethics also talks about when we're conducting research. And I really hope all of you will, even if you are just working in private practice, you should be doing some sort of research. That doesn't always mean you're publishing, but you're studying your practice. But whenever you're doing research, you need to be doing it in an ethical way. And principle 6, responsibility to the profession. Marriage and family therapists respect the rights and responsibilities of professional colleagues and participate in activities that advance the goal of the profession. Financial arrangements. This can be really tricky. Make sure you know about how to work with third-party payers, and that you understand how to do billing, what to do if people don't pay. Can you send them to collections? And understand the logistics around that. Advertising. I see mistakes around this all the time, and I have to believe that people were received training and know better. Like I know a local therapist who got his undergrad at a prestigious university, but then his advanced degrees were at a different university. But he, in his advertising, he does misleading to make people think that he got his doctorate and master's degree at the place that he got his undergrad. It's marketing, but it's untruth. It's not truthful. So. One of the things to think about is I like looking at absolutism to the other end of pluralism. There's different ways to think about it. Like it's just not always as concrete as we might think. There's things that are prohibited, actions which are not seen as permissible at all. Absolutism kind of sees that the value of that. Then there's sort of tolerated, those actions that and values which there are legitimate practice differences. Like, for example, the receiving of gifts. It doesn't say that it's illegal to receive gifts, but there could be problems with doing that. There might be cultural differences, and so there's things that are more complex than just black and white. And then there's sort of the ideal. It's a moral vision of what an ideal society would be like. We're trying to figure out what that ideal thing would be in our work. Okay, couple of areas that people I think get into trouble. So let's mention them. Dual relationships. So as you know, dual relationship exists when a professional their lives overlap in more than one role. So most commonly, the second relationship is a social or a financial or a professional. And it may be during therapy or after therapy. but you really need to be know about what the guidelines are for that. So, I mean, it could be there's some that are clearly unethical. I'll talk about those, but then there's some that are more uh, vague, and then there might be some that are just sort of acceptable. Let's talk about it. A mental health professional may be asked to assist and advocate for clients' educational, medical, financial, social service, and legal needs. Um, Views and practice tend to different based on sort of where you are contextually and your theoretical orientation. So I will just say, like, I've had colleagues who are very strict on only the single role of a therapist. I've talked to some of you about this. One of my main theories that I learned after school is liberation psychology, and the idea from liberation psychology is kind of like anything that will help better a person's life is within the role of a therapist. So I'm a little bit more flexible than I might be, but I also don't live in the litigious society that y'all live in. Types of dual relationships: entering into a business relationship with clients, uh, services and product bartering. Like, you bring me a bushel of corn and I'll give you therapy. Those complexities with that. Delivery of professional services to close friends and family members. Another side story that I should keep to myself. But here in Mexico, uh, it is more likely that people will go to a therapist that they know. I mean, this hasn't really actually been part of my practice, but most of my colleagues, they see the children of friends of theirs. Yeah, that's true. Okay, entering into a professional relationship with employees, socializing with clients and students, accepting clients' referrals of their close relationships, accepting acquaintances as clients, encountering small world hazards. I mean, you probably all know this. If you, I don't, where you all live is not too big. You're most likely to run into people. I used to work in a very very small town. The only thing that was there was a Walmart. So on big adventures out of the house, I'd go to Walmart sometimes, and I'd for sure see a client anytime I went. Um, but they also needed therapy services there. Accepting gifts or asking for favors, giving gifts, or conducting therapy outside of a professional setting. Like, let's meet at Starbucks and we'll do therapy there. So many problems with that. Don't do that. Okay. Um, some of the most problematic dual relationships, sexual relationships. If you look at the kinds of complaints that are filed, this is one of the more common ones. 25% of them are this. I just think, I mean, I just know too many sad stories about this. People who invested, I don't know, 8 years of their lives to get their degrees, all the money that went towards tuition, and then because they made this choice, they end up in prison sometimes, or they lose their license. And I think, what a complete waste. There's plenty of people to have sex with. Don't ever do this. It's just dumb. Um, Outside friendships with clients. I know sometimes you really do develop a form of intimacy with clients, but there's multiple reasons why it's not appropriate to develop friendships with them. That's not the role that you're in, and it also stops them from being able to come back and see you in the future if they need. Working relationship with clients, hiring them, I mean, or working for them, that's not appropriate. And then, yeah, sex with former clients. I mean, it's just stupid to me that there's states that allow it later, but because why? Just don't. Okay. I mean, there's all kinds of risks with that, and I think y'all are smart enough to know some of them, but it can negatively affect. There's plenty of research that shows it negatively affects clients if they're exploited or taken advantage of by the intimacy of therapy. It's bad for the profession. It makes clients therapy have a bad name, etc. but is a dual relationship unethical? There's some that are clearly are, but not all therapeutic approaches disparage the dual relationships. The most practiced and empirically based approaches, such as behaviorist, humanist, cognitive, family systems, group, existential therapy, at times see dual relationships as an important part of the treatment plan. And there's just some that are unavoidable, like if you're in a small town or if you're part of a small community. Um, Sometimes people want people from the community to be, who will understand sort of their context. Mostly it's about having a conversation with them about it and being really clear about the possible negative implications. Some of the ideas to think about with this is power, power differentials that can be, the duration of the relationship, and then how clearly was the termination, or whether or not they might want to seek your help in the future. So step one, assess the current relationship according to those three dimensions. Examine the contemplated relationships along the three dimensions. Examine both relationships for role incompatibility. Consult with a supervisor or with a colleague, and then discuss the decision with the consumer. Other clear ways to safeguard yourself is have clear expectations and boundaries. Have that in your informed consent. It's not a singular conversation. Have ongoing conversations about it. Stick to the time limits if you're going to have a dual relationship. No matter what, you still have the responsibility to protect confidentiality. Document this really well, and then seek consultation. It might be helpful to seek consultation from people who don't always agree with you. You don't want to just find a bubble of colleagues that will tell you what you already believe. Supervision and continuing education. Some questions you might ask: have I sought out supervision regarding the issues that have arisen in the dual relationship? Have I appropriately documented these? Have I examined my own wants and needs? Like, why are you doing this? Given that some real thought. And have I explored, like, maybe there's a way not to have a dual relationship, and maybe it's through referrals or some other way to reduce the possible risks that are involved. Okay, just a few things about confidentiality. This is number, well, also 25%. So a good percentage of the complaints are about this. So remember some of the things around confidentiality: autonomy, fidelity, and beneficence. Those concepts should be guiding principles as you make decisions around confidentiality. There's also terms that you'll hear, like privilege, which is a legal issue. Clients hold privilege and can decide who can know about their information. Of course, there's some differences if it's a minor. Confidentiality is the ethical duty to keep clients' identity and disclosure of secrets. And privileged communication is the client's right to prevent court from demanding the therapist's disclosure. Clients need to know through informed consent for treatment that there are exceptions to a therapist's keeping confidentiality. Reasonable suspicion of child abuse or neglect, or elder abuse or neglect. The burden of proof is not on the psychologist. The psychologist or therapist has a reasonable amount of freedom to act here. So if you think that these are issues, you actually have a duty to warn. Other limits: court mandated treatment. Sometimes they require proof of therapy and often reporting the facts, or at least summaries of what your work is involved. Involuntary commitment to a treatment center. Psychologists present specific evidence of behavior required for commitment, like being committed. But you must maintain confidentiality over all information. Like, you don't have to disclose. If you have to break confidentiality, you limit it to what's required. Doesn't mean you just dump all the information that you might have. If the court demands, like if you get a subpoena to appear and produce testimony, sometimes you have to bring documents, like a court order. If you do, always contact a lawyer, also talk to your supervisor, etc. In the end, the people's good is the highest law. So even in those cases, you have a decision about what you're going to do, because the higher good should be what's guiding you. Other exceptions: reimbursement for third-party payers. Again, that needs to be in your informed consent. Sometimes it's just limited to diagnosis. That can still have implications. Maybe you should talk to clients about those implications. Danger to self, if they're suicidal. If there's an imminent threat, then you have a duty to act. You must protect a person who may act on those thoughts. It's a really personal decision, but not when a client's in treatment. Like maybe you're open to the idea that people have the right to commit suicide, but you have a legal responsibility and ethical responsibility as a therapist to act. If they're going to harm someone else, I'm sure you're familiar. If you're not, then you should review the Tarasoff case. Basically, it's someone, it's the duty to warn. If you know someone's going to go and harm someone, then you need to act in order to stop that harm from happening. Now therapists have a duty to warn intended victims and authorities, not to protect them, but to give them a chance to protect themselves. So yeah. One last thing. So a lot of the same things that apply between clients and therapists apply between supervisors and supervisees, or students and professors. Basically, don't exploit, avoid multiple relationships, don't do therapy with supervisees, don't engage in sexual intimacy with supervisees. Again, just stupid. Don't do it. Don't allow supervisees to perform or purport to be beyond their competencies. Maintain their confidentiality, although faculty and working within the same training institute do have the right to talk about you all. And then think about which one for you would be the most challenging and what will help you to do this appropriately. Hola, buenas tardes. Thank you so much. I just want to ask a few questions about your experience with ethics. My first question is, what's the main difference you've noticed in how therapists think about ethics between Mexico, United States, and Canada?
There are some cultural differences that it is impossible to understand ethics in the same way. For example, let me tell you this thing. When I was coming to work here, but not in therapy, but in general, people told me that I cannot give Mexican hugs. I cannot hug my colleagues because could be seen as sexual harassment, or could be not very ethical if I give hugs, right? But in Mexico, you give hugs to colleagues, students, everybody hugs, right? And it is not seen as you are sexual harassing nobody. And that is a cultural difference. And I think that as an analogy or metaphor about what is happening in clinical practices too. If a client gives you a hug, that is the most probably that if you are giving therapy at the end, maybe the client will hug you, right? And if you refuse the physical contact in that sense, actually you are probably damaging your, accountability or therapeutic alliance, or how is the other word? A therapeutic relationship. They will feel like refused, like it will be a very awkward moment if you avoid physical contact. I think Mexicans or Latinos are more flexible. Is that you have lemons and you make lemonade. If you are in a small city, your therapist could be, your friend, your neighbor, your professor, everything. And and you are more flexible because I think you adapt to the conditions. And but here I can tell you that there are no flexibility in any practice. I don't understand that. That is a difference, I think, a huge difference. In Mexico, if a student feels very distressed and they are doing the internship, not the theoretical part, and they want to go with a professor because they trust them, because they think that professor is very excellent therapist, and they want to work with that person, and it's not currently the professor, in Mexico it's not seen very bad. It's seen bad when you are giving the classes and you are charging for therapy. That could be considered an exploitation, right? But if the 1 year ago was your professor, or maybe there is a possibility, but not in this moment to be, I think it is not that rigid and it is not understood as unethical. They tell you that you cannot have personal emails with your clients. You cannot send email with your client. You cannot have on Facebook your former clients, current clients, etc. And that it's a difference, I think, in Mexico. In Mexico, this dual relationship, in terms of being harmful, if you have a former client as a Facebook friend, could be seen as there is no any harm there, right? Especially the way you use the Facebook. But for example, here they are in Canada, very strict about any social media relationship with your clients. They are you cannot be seen as unethical. And I think in Mexico there is not seen. There is a difference between, how do you say, like violation of ethical principle and a boundary crossing. And sometimes there are social boundaries that are, how do you say, crossed, but they are not seen as an ethical violation for Mexican, right?
Now, it's not uncommon in Mexico for a therapist to see a friend's family member. Like if you had a friend whose daughter was having problems, is it? And here in Mexico, it wouldn't be unusual for you to see your friend's daughter. Is that accurate?
It will be unusual to see,
No,
or usual to see.
It would be. It would not be very different, right?
No, of course not. If one maybe you cannot be the therapist of your friend, right? But for example, if a friend of you sends you the nephew, sometimes the daughter, the husband, I don't know, right? Because it is what I'm telling you. Sometimes there are social encounters when you can meet with your client, or for example, if your children are in the same school and you are the therapist of the parents of your children's friend, and you are in a piñata, actually you are seeing your client there, right? It is not friend, but it is the same social encounter. That is not seen. I think, as unethical, because there is no harm, as I'm telling you, in this definition of cultural difference about what is harm. There is no harm that you are in a piñata with your client. You are not socializing, maybe, right? But actually, you can see your clients, shopping in the same store, having lunch. You are in a cafeteria and you enter in that restaurant, cafeteria, and you see your client. You will not ignore your client. You will say, hello, how are you? And if your client say, do you want to sit here? According to if you are alone or with people. Because if you are alone, you can say, yes, for 5 minutes, So, yes, all the social boundaries about which is unethical or not is very, very different. Yeah, I agree. For example, in here, they actually are very, o sea, keeping a file. It's it is more than ethic. It is like a, how do you say, obligation. Obligation exists, that word. So it is a rule. You need to do. Everybody who has a client needs to keep records about the conversation and stuff, right? And in Mexico, if you work in an institution, you have that. They have files. But what I'm sure is that in Mexico, private practitioners, most of them, they don't have any file at all. But I know that there is a Mexican regulation that says that it is, how do you say, obliged to have files, and if the client asks for the file, you need to deliver the file. However, it is like a rumor. I have never seen that law, and I am not quite sure about that. But the difference, I think, is between working in an institution or working in private practice. And it's not seen it is not seen that you are unethical because you don't keep a file. Actually, practitioners that keep a file are seen just as very well organized people, you know? Not that they are more ethical, just more generous with the time and more organized. I think the basic ethics is the same. You know that that psychotherapists should not harm the client or the consultant in any possible way, that there should be not harm like sexually exploitation or economical exploitation. That I think another ethics that is the same is that the therapeutical space should be beneficial for the client. Everything is very rude, even if it's not written. Sometimes people have told me, no, but here we do this. It is not written, you know. For example, the PowerPoint thing. Well, it's another example, very different, but to show you how the rigidity, right? I do not teach with PowerPoint, and here they told me that it is obliged for me, even if it's not written anywhere, that I need to use PowerPoint. And they told me everybody here teaches with PowerPoints, and now I am being trained in how to use PowerPoints because they assume that I didn't use PowerPoint because I'm Mexican. I don't know to use this software. It is very funny, and I need to do it because here everybody, how to say, teaches with PowerPoint. So I think another difference is that in this culture, at least in Canada, there is a lot of fear about doing things. They prefer not to take risks, you know, and they do not question the system. Sometimes they think that because they were told to do X thing is better because it was like that. I am not sure. And the other day, when in one meeting, when I told that someone asked me, how do you solve this problem about if a student is on distress, what will happen in Mexico? When I explained what will happen in Mexico, they were like, oh my God, you know, like very scared. And they told me, no, that will never happen here. So also, I think there is a belief that in States and Canada, how you do things is better, much better than Mexico. All the proposals I gave because I'm Mexican, yes, it are seen like less worthy ideas. And I mean for psychotherapeutic conversations about the training. If I give my opinion about anything that is happening in the training, no. But if that happens in Mexico, it's less, right? So I don't know. Maybe the one difference is the attitude that Mexicans are less rigid for some things. Maybe.